In this video, we'll talk about Bootstrap containers. We've used containers before to do fixed width layouts. Bootstrap has containers built in that are responsive to the size of the page. So I'm in the docs section of their site under layout, and I have containers here. So containers are the most basic layout element in Bootstrap, and they're required when we use the grid system. And the grid system is such a big part of Bootstrap that you definitely always want to use a container. Containers are used to contain, pad, and sometimes center the content within them. Containers can be nested. You don't really ever need to nest a container. There's very few places where you would need to do that. There's so many other better ways to do it than that. Okay, so Bootstrap comes with 3 different containers. It has a regular container, which uses those widths we talked about, the responsive breakpoints, extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, and double extra large. Okay. It has a container fluid, which everything always takes 100% of the width at all breakpoints. I don't tend to use that one too much. We'll take a look at that in a second. And then it has a dot container with a breakpoint. So every time you see this breakpoint here, that means you're going to substitute the abbreviations for the size of container breakpoints that you want. So container-MD would be container medium, container-LG would be container large, container-XL would be a container X, and we'll see how those work in just a second. We're going to write some code. I keep promising that, and I realize I've done a couple of videos since the last time I've promised it, but so let's actually do it. Default container. Let's just use a dot container class. So all of your CSS elements are going to be applied from Bootstrap just by naming a class that is already set up for you. So we've created classes from scratch and applied them to elements on our web pages before. Now Bootstrap has all these classes built in for us, and we can just use their classes. So we need a div with its class set to container. We don't have to write the container class. It is already built in. So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to come over here inside my body. Div class equals container. And then it says put some content here. So let's do that. I'm going to put H1, and remember, I can do H1 using the abbreviations and hit tab, and it finishes out the tag, opening tag, closing tag, puts the cursor right in the middle, and I'm just going to put hello world. And I am going to do I think I am going to do, I'm going to do something extra here that you don't need to know. We'll talk about it later. Border. I'm going to put a border around this. Border. Now these are classes that are also built into Bootstrap. I know about them, so I'm going to use them. Border says I'm going to use a border. I want border to be size 5. And let's do border dash. I think there's a dark. Let's see if this does anything for me. And I have my preview up over here. There we go. Okay. So for my H1, I set some borders. I turned on. This is built in. It's a class that's built in Bootstrap that lets me set a border on anything I want. So border turns on the border. Border-5 applies another class that sets the thickness of the border. Border-dark tells it to use a dark color because I want you to be able to see it easy. And then here's the preview of my file. I have it open in my browser. So this video isn't about doing the borders. I am just doing that so I can show you how a container works. So we're using the container class. And let's look what happens when we change sizes. So we've used containers before, and you know that what a container does is it usually sets these margin left and margin right to auto. So it keeps our page content centered within the browser window no matter how far it gets. But in this case, the container adjusts, and you can see as I slowly move this in, the container adjusted. I just went from that XXL size down to XL. And now I'm going to go down to large. And then here is medium, and you can see it jump every time. It's adjusting to the width using that media query that we talked about. This viewport, it's getting the width and it's adjusting the class that's applied, the styles that are applied based on how wide the browser width is. And the browser width on a phone is only this big. We'll see other ways to simulate that in a little bit. I'll show you how to do that in an upcoming video. But you can see those jumps. Every time we hit one of those breakpoints, it jumps to a new level. It adjusts sizes. Okay. So that's the container class. Now let's do container fluid. I'm going to put -fluid on it. I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh it. So what does fluid do? Fluid causes it to use, notice there's still a little bit of margin on each side, but there's no padding. And you can see that it's a fluid. It's not doing the breakpoints. It's not jumping. It's not adjusting. This isn't something we're really going to concentrate on too much. Notice the font gets smaller as the screen gets smaller. The boxes get bigger. So fluid is a little more fluid. It always keeps things at 100% width. Okay, where back on just a regular container, it did not keep things at 100% width. I just lost my preview. I accidentally closed it. It doesn't always keep things at 100% width, but it keeps the pages at those breakpoint widths as it detects it. So small is the default, or extra small is the default, and every time we get it, it jumps up in increments. Okay. It's a little bit easier to design in the increments, I believe. Okay. But when we get down to these sizes, sometimes this extra space on the sides can take up a little bit of real estate that we don't want it to take up. So there is kind of a blend setting between container and container fluid, and that is container with the breakpoint. Okay, so if I come back in here into my code and set my container to container dash, I'm going to do medium. I tend to like that one a lot. Container medium, and this basically says that we're going to use fluid up until we hit the medium size, and at that point we're going to start using the breakpoint. So let's look at the difference in behavior of our little web page. I'm going to refresh it. So at these small sizes, see how it's responsive? It's nice and smooth. It's using 100% of our screen, which is important when we're on these smaller devices. We want to use as much of the screen as we can. But once we jump up above medium, there it is, it's going to start using the breakpoints now. So you can start seeing the even margins on both sides. It's not always using 100% of the width, but it's using the sizes from the breakpoints. Okay. So again, the medium, when we start adding these, we're going to start at the medium size to apply the container breakpoints, basically is what that says. So we design for the smallest width, and at some point we tell it, hey, once you get up to the medium size, I want to use the other kind of container. So that's kind of a nice one. I like that one, container medium. All right, we'll start looking at rows and columns in the upcoming videos.